Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me at the beginning of a new era. Since the last time I marathoned, the Power of the Daleks has had its animation spruced up a little bit, with the special edition having come out in the meantime. I was really keen to actually watch it for the first time, to be honest. I have this odd reserve of willpower when it comes to watching Doctor Who in order, that if I could apply to other areas of my life, I'd be incredibly well balanced. Anyway, I was looking forward to finally watching the special edition because the last time, that first animation, I was really disappointed with it. I shan't dwell on it too much because it's the story that I'm appraising, not the means by which it was brought back from non-existence. I don't harp on specifically about the recon that I happen to be watching. It's the story that matters. And so it would be unfair to focus too much on that animation. But seriously, that first attempt I thought was poor. Not just shonky in terms of execution. I mean, at one point in episode 3, Lesterson appeared to be sliced in half, or at least have an arm amputated. Not just that, but the characters didn't seem to act when they weren't talking, and I know that's a dumb thing to say about animated characters, but the point is, there's quite a lot of silences in this story, and if the animation is meant to give us a way of watching the story moving, for stretches of it, it felt like we might as well have just been watching the already good loose cannon reconstruction. I was grateful that it was released in 2016 for the story's 50th anniversary, and that it could, if you're that way inclined, take up a space on your DVD collection, which now, season 4 these days, has got every story except for the Smugglers and the Highlanders. So don't get me wrong, I was grateful that it was made. It's just that, yeah, that first animation, with apologies, wasn't for me. So I'm happy to say that the special edition is a significant improvement and allowed me a way back to really enjoying this story. What? You mean you didn't used to? Held aloft by many as a classic, and perhaps the classicist of the lost classics, it enjoys a reputation which, I feel, is tinted mainly by it being Patrick Troughton's first story. The Daleks themselves do play their part in this, but I'll get to them later. With us so desperately wanting to be able to see what exactly this new Doctor is like at these very early stages, I've often thought that perhaps we pin too much on the power of the Daleks. The very first time I experienced this story in recon form, I was most definitely swept up in that. It's just that on subsequent viewings I found that the shine has wore off slightly, and in fact on the last marathon I actually found it quite difficult, although I am willing to accept that that may be down to me not being able to connect with that first animation. Now though, I think I'm beginning to get it again. Last time it kept me at arm's length and left me out in the cold while it parted inside with all of those who think it's the goat. This time, while I might not be back to being the life and soul of that party, I am definitely enjoying myself in the kitchen. At the beginning, it does a really good job of keeping this new Doctor and the process of his changing bodies really mysterious. Is it the same man? Is it a different man? And obviously referring to himself in the third person only keeps those questions coming, and I find it psychologically very interesting. I myself will never truly comprehend the process of regeneration and what it must be like to go through that. Even before the phrase was coined, it still doesn't really shy away from examining how this might affect the Doctor, and there are suggestions at how it does affect the Doctor scattered throughout. So, for example, he's just changed into somebody else entirely, with a different face and a different body from the one he presumably thinks he was born with. So, it's no wonder that he's going to think of himself as an imposter. Troughton himself starts off quite sinister, and his cackle in the TARDIS is almost malevolent, and I'm reminded of Hartnell's own less than cuddly introduction, and I do appreciate the parallel, however intentional that may or may not be, and I will admit it might not be intentional. What strikes me almost immediately is how irritating this new Doctor is. And not in the way that that might suggest either. He doesn't irritate me, not by any means, but I can sympathise with Ben, for example, when the Doctor will just keep playing recorder while Ben's trying to get some perfectly valid questions answered. Polly seems less bothered by the whole thing, which is in keeping with their dynamic from the Smugglers. Ben is far more sceptical and distrusting, whereas Polly is a little bit more open to believing the fantastic. It helps for viewers who are having to acclimatise to a completely different leading man. And make no mistake, Patrick Troughton certainly rings the changes. He's obviously seeing what works and he's still experimenting, but it's a big old part and it hasn't been recast before. That means there's a lot to explore and a hell of a lot of furniture to rearrange and get comfortable in. Now, rather than cosily getting his feet under the table and sitting on Hartnell's sofa for a bit, resetting the levels on the TV more to his liking, Troughton is straight in, shifting the room around and rifling through the underwear drawer. I completely understand his scattershot approach. I once saw a fellow fan describe it as like he's committing like a willful act of vandalism on the part, and that has stuck with me ever since. And it's an analogy I really rather like. He isn't destroying it, not by any means, but he is graffitiing it a bit. Which isn't to say he's disrespecting it, not at all. Hartnell did such a good job of crafting this character. It's a far more delicate and intricate piece of work than is given credit for even today. So Troughton has to approach it in a way which respects what came before at the same time as forging into the unknown. And that's a tricky balancing act, and one that would have defeated most men. So I can't come down too hard on Troughton for working it out as he goes along, and maybe very occasionally wandering down the wrong alleyway when he does. It's not a blistering start for him, but there are moments along the way that lead me to conclude that we are in more than safe hands. And like Hartnell pioneered the role, Troughton does some pioneering of his own as well. That this is now such a template for new Doctor behaviours is in no small part down to Troughton himself. There are moments of this template Doctor behaviour that are so at odds with Hartnell's Doctor, but now seem almost expected of every other subsequent one, because of what Troughton did. His conversation with himself is nicely thrown away as the most normal thing in the world by Troughton. He's going from commanding authority to fruit is very nicely done and gets me every time.
If there was a bomb under this floor, timed to go off in 5 minutes, would you ask my permission before you ripped up the floorboards? Fruit!
His repetition of Lesterson listen to the point where he even gets Polly joining in is really quite cute.
Lesterson, listen. Lesterson, listen. Lesterson, listen. Exercises the tongue. Try it. Lesterson, listen. Lesterson, listen.
Lesterson, listen. Lesterson, listen. Lesterson, listen. Lesterson, listen. Lesterson, listen. Lesterson, listen.
That Polly gets very little to do again is beginning to worry me. She's off to tidy up at one point, and not because she's asked to. And her borderline hysterics in episode 6 are a bit unfortunate, and she ends up finishing the story with very little justification for her presence. And the fact that I know that she can work really well, and especially with Ben, means that because she's marginalised for what feels like the third time in a row, it all ends up really frustrating. Although I suppose her presence is actually justified, because in what little she gets to do, Wills is crucial in getting the audience to accept the new Doctor, and that shouldn't be underestimated. But I guess, like, aside from that, which admittedly is crucial, she has very little to do plot-wise when it comes to the Daleks. So, but yeah, if she wasn't here, then the story would definitely be diminished. I just wish that she had slightly more agency within the problem solving and the defeat of the Daleks. Yes, it's very important that we accept the second Doctor. She does absolutely indispensable work there. But she will still feel slightly diminished herself if she has very little to do with the mechanics of the plot of the week. Ben fares a little better. He gets more to do than Polly, and there are some great lines in there as well. When the Doctor is asked if he's in two minds about something, and Ben replies,
"Yeah, and two bodies."
That's a snapshot of Ben at his withering best, and what that does is it anchors this massive gamble of the Doctor changing face, but within reality. So it's not ignoring this seismic change. It's not like the Doctor's changed, we're going to move on. It still has ramifications for Ben's trust of him. So it's still definitely an issue, but it is also inviting us to accept it and that because the show's not ignoring it, we have to trust the show that it's going to handle it well. It comes from the regular, ordinary, good old bloke Ben, and it highlights just how balmy it is. But that it has happened, and we've got to get used to it. In fact, the more I think about it, more than any other companions, given their characters, their relationship with each other, and their relative inexperience with the Doctor, Ben and Polly are the perfect companions to steer us through the first regeneration. And the thing is, Ben gets a little bit sidelined as well, so I suppose I have to take it as kind of like a deliberate decision to remove Ben and Polly from the limelight slightly to focus more on the new Doctor, which is fair enough. So perhaps this story isn't picking on Polly as much as I thought it was. It's just that the knock-on effect is that Polly gets a little bit shortchanged again. But if you have a new leading man who has more effervescence, more vigour, and is easier to work with than his predecessor, then I suppose it makes sense that you're going to want to use him as much as possible. I used to think that this story suffered slightly because of where it shone its spotlight. So I was very nonplussed with the lineup of guest characters, and focusing so much on the Doctor, which I did appreciate it doing, it just felt like it came at a cost, and that cost was a rather lifeless roster of guest characters. Now though, I'm completely behind that decision. We're going to be following this new Doctor now going forward, so have him make an impact, show him off, and even though we might be missing Hartnell, get us excited for Troughton. And if this story has a couple of aces up its sleeve, then yeah, Troughton is most definitely one of them. And the other one I would suggest is the Daleks. They are better used here than in any of their appearances so far. With their name in the title, they can be used as a creeping threat to be teased slowly, and that works for them. Presented with images of them dormant in cobwebs and the scuttling mutant build the atmosphere, and as a result of them being handled differently, the Doctor has to engage the Daleks differently. This means this is absolutely not a boring story. I really like the Daleks in this one. Quietly watching the scientists at the start makes them, for the first time since we met them, really creepy. One of their defining features is their shouting, rasping voice, and by the end of episode 2, they haven't used it yet. It's really unnerving. This is purposefully reconfiguring the Daleks as a monster to fear, and it works. They're clever rather than relying on force, and they're being used as villains rather than as a cultural phenomenon for the first time since their inaugural story. And rather than feeling like a gratuitous return for the sake of it, this time they actually have a decent caper up their plungers, and have the added bonus of being a good crutch for the new Doctor to lean on in his first story. I only refer so much to the last time I watched this story on my last marathon because I do think there's a big difference in how much I enjoyed it then and now. Despite these two considerable advantages, it did feel really hollow last time. Even though you've got Troughton and you've got the Daleks, it did feel like 6 episodes was a little bit too long for them to carry by themselves. And I remember thinking that this was a 4-parter if ever there was one. Now though, I couldn't disagree with myself more. Handling the new Doctor and getting us used to him and bending him in a bit won't take 2 episodes by itself, but Whittaker uses those extra 2 episodes to also create that pervading sense of dread that makes this story work. So are you listening, past Chris? 6 episodes are not remotely wasted here. And in a further example of just flat out disagreeing with my previous assessment of the story, when the bodies start piling up as the story reaches its end, I thought that was a little bit unnecessary. And what I actually wrote was, it pulls the climax out of its ass, so it's hardly going to smell of roses. What an idiot. This climax punctures that building unease which I have said twice now is what makes the story work. It has been skillfully built throughout, and there needs to be a significant body count because otherwise the Doctor's warnings from the beginning would have been incorrect. He would have sounded unreasonable. The show needs the Doctor here, particularly the new Doctor, to be right. So his portents of doom have to come true. This isn't just a gratuitously violent finale, it is needed and it is earned. So yeah, I've come around to the power of the Daleks again, and I still might not say that it's like the god tier missing Doctor Who, but with really good use of the Daleks and Troughton being a nicely uneasy new presence, it is entirely successful at setting up a new paradigm for the show. it treats its monster and its Doctor with respect, and therefore its viewers too. So, 140 episodes into Doctor Who, and the second Doctor has firmly made his entrance. Now, at the moment, I'm trying to hold off slightly on revealing my preferences when it comes to Doctors. I'm obviously trying to think of the story that I'm watching as present tense. So to say where each Doctor sits in the ranking, it kind of defeats the object of the exercise at this early stage for one of them. But what I will say is that I do love Patrick Troughton. I do, very much. But if I am thinking of the story that I'm watching as present tense, I don't think he's completely charmed me just yet. But he has absolutely reassured me enough that I am still more than along for the ride, even though Hartnell's not here anymore.
I am your servant.
Gives me chills. Such a brilliant subversion of what the viewer will have expected from a Dalek. Plus, it totally undermines the Doctor in front of the colony's inhabitants. If I'm being entirely honest, I've never quite got a handle on why there are rebels and what they're rebelling against, but I get that there are more important things going on with this story and it needed them for the Daleks to kind of like latch onto. But I think addressing it in any greater detail would have stretched this story too thinly. So it's a minor issue. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this constitutional through the Mercury Swamps, then you know how YouTube works. Please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel and me enormously. And what do you think of the Power of the Daleks? Do you think it's the best of all the missing stories, or can you just not see the fuss about it? Does Patrick Troughton have an amazing debut, or has he not quite got a handle on the character yet? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for what is the final pure historical, at least for a really long time. So if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll see you in the Highlands.